or in the States or what have you. So you can sort of do your research and see opportunities to contact these certain type of suppliers there. And I was talking about databases because all these directories I mentioned are also available online. So you may want to subscribe to a certain service providers, and you have access to the most current information of the same information. And travel, again, this sort of comes out from the left wing or what have you. But once you get into business, you will start doing some significant travel. And if you had an opportunity to go to the Far East or Europe or some of these other third world countries, you're going to see products that you've never seen. And we take for granted all kinds of product here in Canada. But there are certain opportunities that lend itself to bring it here in Canada. In many cases, these third world countries where they're all handcrafted or what have you, people would pay a premium when it's a one-of-a-kind, where if it's coming off of a machine assembly line, there's nothing special about it. Again, at the same time, when you go overseas, you may want to line up a couple ducks in Canada here saying, hey, I'm planning to go over to Nigeria, and I'll be interested in introducing your products to certain business people there. So similar, when you go overseas, make sure in your briefcase you've got some companies that you represent here that you might have an interest in expanding in those markets as well there. So again, we've got over 30 sources, and this is only sort of represents 10. But the key here is try to tap into as many sources and then keep your options open. What you want to do is narrow down to 1 or 2 and focus your energy. But at the beginning, if you don't know, start with an industry or a product. Don't go all over the map. Try to find a product that you personally have an interest in. For the reason, again, the pasture is always greener on the other side, but you'll be surprised. When you get into something that you know intimately about, you won't chase your own tail. And this happens in trade time and time again. People are going to be asking for pricing that doesn't exist. Or you'll find someone who says, yes, I can supply product at this price. You open up a letter of credit, only to find out this guy can't supply because the market price is like 10 times what the market is. But if you don't know what the market indicating price is, and you don't know who this guy is, you probably go up the path, only waste 6 months or what have you there. So try to stay with an industry that you know so you don't spin your wheels. In many cases, that's what happens. So pick an area of specialty. But the key is get into something that you have an interest in so that you'll take the time to sort of learn about the product. And even if you're not making a whole lot of money, you're prepared to stay in there and hang in there until the money starts coming in. Because the easiest thing to do is sort of just throw up your hands and say, you know, it was a good idea, but maybe import-export was not for me or what have you. And it's because you really were looking for products that you couldn't care less, and you were just looking for a bottom line dollar or what have you there. But if you have a certain passion, there's excitement, enthusiasm, it'll sort of get you through some of those quiet nights or what have you there. Now, step number 2 here is to obtain some samples. If you're an inventor or what have you, maybe come up with a prototype or what have you at this stage here. Now, I'm not talking about buying a blow molding machine or making up a die and cranking out 10,000 units as a test at this stage here. You can hire up a guy to make up one sample prototype, maybe a sample package of how it's going to be displayed if it's for retail purposes or what have you there. And the reason we want these samples here is to sort of get a reaction from potential buyers. If this product was available, would you be prepared to give me a conditional purchase order? Or if what changes have to be made to accommodate your purchase? And a lot of times when you deal with major chain stores, again, someone like Hudson Bay who owns Zellers, they're going to want an exclusive. They'll say you cannot call on Eaton's or Sears for minimum 6 months to a year if you want us to carry it in our stores or what have you there. So these are kind of negotiations behind the scenes that's going to happen. Similar like Shopping Channel, which I'm well aware of, that we work with as well. They all want control or certain rights to the distribution that ties up your hands in many cases that don't allow you to call on potential customers. And these are the kind of decisions you're going to have to make. But these are positive ones in many cases. But if you talk to the buyer at Simpsons, or Simpsons not even around, Sears or Zellers, and they'll say, yeah, I saw this product 6 months ago, and you're asking how much? Because he might have been offered the same price, same product, but for $5 less. But the reason you're going to talk to these type of buyers is these are professional buyers. They didn't just start yesterday with, in their position. They've been around probably for 5 or 10 years. You're new to this industry in many cases, but there's very few products that they are not aware of in many cases. Now, they do have their own agents overseas sourcing products, bringing products to their attention or what have you. But at the same time, their full-time hours is to talk to importers, distributors like you to see what else is new out there that they maybe want to put on their store shelves or what have you there. But the best thing about this step here is that you'll find out if there is a need for your product out there and if they're willing to give you a purchase order. Once you have this purchase order in hand, now you've got a real commitment that you can actually book with the manufacturer to buy the product from them or what have you. Because just because you bring the product into Canada, it doesn't mean that there's a market for it. So instead of investing all this money into inventory, why not find out from a professional buyer if they're interested in it first? And you won't be the first one. I've seen so many importers who buy product and don't even know what to do with it once it comes into Canada. What I'm saying here is you can probably save a little time and money. Like I said, it'll probably take you 3 to 7 products before you find the one that's going to kick in for you. Step number 3 here is to test your product. This probably is the most important step. This is the step that's going to tell you whether to walk away from this opportunity, this product, or to really kick in and maybe look at releasing some space, hiring a temporary help or what have you there. Unfortunately, most entrepreneurs don't do any research. Like I said, they'll spend $10,000, import a container product, find out that it's restricted, there's certain labeling requirements or what have you there. If they're negotiating a deal international with a foreign buyer, they find out the buyer doesn't have the resources, or they're a broker or intermediary. They're not the final buyer. They are only the buyer's agent or what have you there. So this sort of all encompasses research. And what I'm using number 3 here as a lead-in to the first subject topic today is on import-export there. Because I really believe when you get involved with international trade, 90% of your efforts, it really encompasses different areas of research. The final closing of the deal, the opening of the LC is more formality, and that takes very quickly. But it's all the behind the scenes. You have to do your diligence that most people don't, and that's when they get themselves into trouble. And I mean, this is sort of a topic. We actually have an 8-week training session that goes through, and we spend 2 days in this area alone. So what I'm going to tell you in 10 minutes is really a condensed version. First, again, like most opportunities, you need to know who your market is, what the potential for your product is. And there's all kinds of industry indicators, numbers that are out there. If you go to Stats Canada, for example, most of the information is minimum 3, in most cases 5 years outdated. So a lot of times, if you're importing, say, an automotive, or you're looking to export an automotive type of product, and you see the automotive industry right now in Ontario represents, I don't know, $6 billion, and you're going to make a certain headlight that's not currently available for this industry. And within that $6 billion, it might represent, I don't know, $50 million potential sales. Now, there might be other lighting manufacturers out there who currently are out there, but you have a certain deal with Magna or what have you, who's prepared to custom make this product because you invented certain part of this product that no one else has access to. But the problem here, again, you're looking at the entire industry of 50 million. Being new, realistically, if you need 5 or 10% of this market to achieve $5 million sales, you're going to have to probably sell whatever, 100 or 200,000 pieces. And in your first year, that may not be realistic. So all of a sudden, instead of needing 2 or 3%, you're going to probably need 20 or 30% to achieve this $5 or $10 million goal that you set out originally thinking that you're going to achieve. What I'm saying here is just be realistic with the market that you're catering to. Because most of the time, we can play in sort of fudge the numbers in many cases, but the bottom line is how much of the market you can actually achieve, realistic, and retain. And what really gets carried away, you're not even looking at Ontario numbers, you look at Canada, the North American numbers, and it really puts it out of perspective. Because chances are your primary customers will be within a 10-kilometer radius. And when you're looking at Ontario, when you look at Canada, you're not going to have your first buyer for Vancouver for 5 years down the road. So you can't factor in that potential market because you're not going to be there for another 5 years. And this is what deceives a lot of people who start making all these fancy forecasts. They look at the North American market being $200 billion, but your market really is within Toronto, and realistically, all of a sudden you need 30% of Toronto sales to achieve this volume that you thought you could do overnight. Supply source, buyer, and supplier. This is probably the most important part. If there's one thing I can emphasize here when you get involved with international trade, you've got to pre-qualify the buyer and the seller. Again, today, I call them fax jockeys because everybody has a fax machine, a computer, what have you. And because you never really see that, and the internet is a good example. The small business person can make themselves look like they're a huge manufacturer over the internet with a real fancy website. Meanwhile, they're working out of their basement. But the main thing here is in international trade, you want to be talking to the final buyer and ultimately the final seller. Now, there is a need and a place for intermediaries that I'll talk about, and this is what I do. I simply bring buyers and sellers together, and I step aside once I make that introduction. But a lot of times, this is the diligence. What's good about today is, unlike 10 years ago, where traveling was very expensive, today you can jump on a plane and literally be anywhere in 24 hours. So if this guy says he's a manufacturer, he shows you a picture of his plant showing all this inventory, you jump on a plane, you find out it's just a forwarding address. You'll know that he's not the supplier very quickly. Similar with the buyer. He might provide you certain banking references or what have you there, only to find out when you ask him to open up a letter of credit, he'll say, well, I need a transferable. Why would he need a transferable if he's the seller or what have you there? He should be the final consignee or the one who's opening up the letter of credit. So these questions will prop up very quickly if you do your diligence there. Regulations and credit checks. Now, in Western countries, there are all kinds of credit bureaus. Like, again, in Toronto, you've got the Better Business Bureau. You've got there's Creditel, Dun & Bradstreet, or what have you. And they can provide you some information, but be very careful when you interpret this information, because anybody can get a DUNS number, even if you just started your business yesterday. And literally, they compile their information over the phone. So they'll send you an application. You can put on your application, and you'll say, I've been in business since 1987. My sales right now are about $18 million. I have a staff of 30 people. And this is the information they're going to enter into their database. So when a foreign company starts inquiring about you based on your DUNS number, oh, yeah, this company's been in business for 20 years. You just started your business yesterday. So be very careful. Though you pay for this information, you think it's accurate and up to date, again, take it with a grain of salt. Foreign countries, communist countries, you'll never get information on these companies. So literally, you have to investigate it. And even then, no one owns the company, so no one takes responsibility. Regulations, this is what intimidates most entrepreneurs from getting involved with international trade. To put everybody's mind at ease, again, trading is probably the oldest business. Government has done their part to sort of discourage trade by putting restrictions to protect certain industries or markets or what have you there. But understand, your task when you get involved with international trade is simply find a buyer or find a seller. The non-selling task, which most entrepreneurs get hung up on, and this is the part we're trying to ascertain what the duty, the tariff, the taxes, if you were to import it, if you were to export, how much it's going to cost to ship or what have you there. There are professionals out there, and I'll talk about later on, that we refer to as freight forwarders, who do nothing but handle shipment. There are customs brokers who do nothing but give you tariff information, again, classification information. So you don't need to know about this information. All your job, and 90% of your time when I talk about marketing, should be spent on qualifying new suppliers or potential secondary suppliers and more customers. Don't waste your time on these non-selling tasks. I mean, based on this information by your customs broker, you'll know it's viable to bring into Canada. Or based on the shipping to export by your freight forwarder, it's not feasible, so you drop it. But entrepreneurs try to become a freight forwarder or become a customs broker, and I can tell you it's an undertaking, it's a career on its own. So spend your time on where your time is best spent. Modifications, again, when you get involved with import, customs brokers will bring to your attention that, yes, to bring this product in Canada, there are certain conditions that are going to have to be made to accommodate the Canadian government. Certain products from third world countries are probably used there every day without any consideration. Canada probably has some of the highest standards, not Canada, but most Western countries set higher standards than most third world countries, particularly when it comes to the environment and safety. Again, a product that might have easily passed, say, an electrical product in a third world country where a very simple wire conductor would suffice. In Canada, they'll probably say it has to be a certain thickness, it has to be insulated, it has to have a certain parts or what have you. So you may have to make certain changes to the product. Not always, but be aware of that. There are certain organizations that you should be aware of. Now, I put CSA here as an example because a lot of people think CSA is a government organization. They're actually a private testing organization and a good, I guess, consulting organization to turn to. Most people think of CSA when it comes to electrical, and probably about 40% of their revenue comes from that area. But if you're importing furniture, CSA probably could give you some advice on what's required to import the product into Canada. They provide all kinds of, I guess, research and resource information, what's required to import the product in Canada. A lot of companies today, they look at Canada as more of a gateway into the United States. Now, it's much more difficult to set up shop in the US, getting